The smell hit the Roman Senate before Emperor Vespasian even entered the room. It wasn't just body odor, it was the stench of urine. Fermented, concentrated human urine that he'd been collecting for weeks. And he was about to explain why this made him a genius. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to discover the most revolting habits of history's most powerful men. Emperors who bathed in blood. Rulers who ate things that would make a vulture vomit. Kings whose personal hygiene was so horrific that their own wives refused to share their beds. These aren't myths or exaggerations. These are documented facts that historians tried to sanitize for centuries. Here's what they don't teach you about absolute power. When you can execute anyone who criticizes you, when reality itself bends to your will, when millions of people exist only to serve your whims, you don't become wise. You become weird. Spectacularly, disgustingly weird. I'm talking about emperors who thought bathing would kill them, rulers who collected their own bodily fluids like trophies, kings who turned their palaces into biological hazard zones. And the worst part? Their courtiers had to pretend this was all perfectly normal. Imagine being a diplomat, trained in etiquette and protocol, walking into a throne room that smells like a medieval sewer. You can't gag, you can't cover your nose. You have to smile and bow and pretend the emperor doesn't have visible lice jumping around in his beard. That was reality for thousands of people throughout history. Let's expose the truth about power and personal hygiene, or rather, the complete lack of it. Emperor number 1, Vespasian, the urine collector. We're starting with Rome's most financially savvy emperor. Vespasian ruled from 69 to 79 AD. He stabilized the empire after civil war. He began construction of the Colosseum. He was, by all accounts, a competent ruler. He was also obsessed with urine. Not in a weird sexual way, in a weird economic way. Vespasian discovered that urine was valuable. Tanners used it to soften leather. Launderers used it to clean clothes. So he did what any entrepreneurial emperor would do. He taxed it. He placed collection vessels at every public toilet in Rome. He created an entire urine economy. His son Titus was disgusted by this. "Father, this is beneath the dignity of Rome," he complained. Vespasian's response became legendary. He held up a gold coin that came from urine taxes. He waved it under his son's nose. "Does this smell bad to you?" he asked. "Pecunia non olet, money doesn't stink." But here's the truly disgusting part. Vespasian didn't just tax urine, he used it personally. He would rinse his mouth with aged urine every morning. He believed it whitened his teeth. Roman physicians actually recommended this. The ammonia in stale urine does have antibacterial properties. But imagine being a senator having a morning meeting with the emperor, and his breath smells like a public urinal. Emperor number 2, Commodus, the gladiator emperor. Commodus ruled Rome from 180 to 192 AD. You might know him from the movie Gladiator, but Hollywood left out his most disgusting habits. This emperor believed he was the reincarnation of Hercules, so he dressed like him, constantly. Lion skin draped over his shoulders, a club in his hand, nothing else. He would walk around the palace essentially naked, except for a dead animal, in the Roman summer heat, without bathing, for weeks. The lion skin would rot on his body. Maggots would fall from it during state dinners. Courtiers would find larvae in their food. But no one could say anything because Commodus would have them executed. He also fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum, not occasionally, 735 times. That's documented. He would fight wild animals, usually ones that were drugged or declawed. Then he'd return to the palace covered in animal blood and refuse to wash. He believed the blood gave him Hercules' strength. He would sleep in it, eat in it, hold court in it. His bed sheets had to be burned after each use. The smell in his chambers was described as the stench of death itself. But the most revolting detail? He would collect the blood of the animals he killed. He'd mix it with wine and drink it during banquets. He'd force his senators to toast with him. Imagine being a dignified Roman official, having to drink lion blood mixed with cheap wine, while the emperor, covered in dried gore, laughs at your discomfort. Emperor number 3, Elagabalus, the rose petal killer. Elagabalus became Roman emperor at age 14 in 218 AD. He ruled for only 4 years, but in that time he achieved levels of disgusting excess that still shock historians. This teenage emperor was obsessed with luxury, particularly rose petals. He would have them scattered everywhere, on floors, on beds, in his bath. Sounds romantic, right? Wait for it. At one banquet, Elagabalus decided to surprise his guests. He had servants release tons of rose petals from the ceiling. Not handfuls, tons. The petals fell like a perfumed avalanche. Guests laughed at first. Then they realized they couldn't move. The petals were too deep. They were drowning in flowers. Several guests actually suffocated to death, buried alive in rose petals while the emperor watched and laughed. But that's not even his most disgusting habit. Elagabalus would host dinner parties where every course was the same color, an all-green meal, an all-blue meal. To achieve blue food, his cooks used toxic dyes. Guests would vomit from the poison. Elagabalus thought this was hilarious. He also had a peculiar bathroom habit. He refused to use the same toilet twice, ever. He had hundreds of toilets built throughout the palace, each one used once, then sealed forever. Archaeologists have found entire wings of the palace that are just abandoned toilets. The waste management alone must have been a nightmare. Emperor number 4, Justin II, the Byzantine biter. Justin II ruled the Byzantine Empire from 565 to 578 AD. He started his reign competently enough. Then something in his mind snapped. The stress of ruling broke him completely, and his madness manifested in the most disturbing ways. Justin developed a habit of biting people, not playful nips, full-on draw-blood attacks. He would bite servants who came too close. He would bite advisors during meetings. He once bit a visiting ambassador so hard he took off part of the man's ear. His courtiers started wearing thick leather padding under their clothes. They developed a warning system. When the emperor's eyes would glaze over, everyone would back away slowly. But the biting wasn't his only disgusting habit. Justin also believed he was being hunted by invisible enemies. So he would hide, under furniture, in closets, behind curtains. The Emperor of Byzantium, ruler of millions, would be found cowering under his throne, covered in his own urine because he was too afraid to come out to use the toilet. His wife Sophia essentially ran the empire while Justin deteriorated. She would have servants chase him around the palace with music, loud organs and drums. The noise would distract him from his paranoid episodes. Imagine being a foreign diplomat. You're there to negotiate a treaty, and you can hear the Emperor of Byzantium screaming and running through the halls while servants chase him with musical instruments. That's not a government, that's a circus. Emperor number 5, Charles VI, the glass delusion. Charles VI of France ruled from 1380 to 1422. He's known as Charles the Mad, and his particular madness was uniquely disgusting. Charles believed he was made of glass, not metaphorically. He literally thought his body was glass and would shatter if touched, so he had iron rods sewn into his clothing to protect himself. He refused to let anyone touch him. He wouldn't sit down normally because he feared breaking. He would stand for hours, swaying slightly, terrified of his own fragility. But here's where it gets truly revolting. Because Charles wouldn't let anyone touch him, he couldn't be bathed for months at a time. In medieval France, during summer, his clothes would rot on his body. His skin would develop sores and infections. Lice would infest his hair and beard so thoroughly that courtiers could see them moving. The smell was so overwhelming that meetings had to be held outdoors. Even then, people would stand upwind of the king. Charles also refused to change his clothes. He believed that removing his protective garments would expose his glass body to danger. He wore the same outfit for 5 months straight. The fabric literally disintegrated. Pieces would fall off as he walked. Servants would follow behind him, picking up chunks of rotted clothing. When his advisors finally convinced him to change, they had to cut the clothes off. The fabric had fused to his infected skin. The process took hours and left Charles screaming in agony. Emperor number 6, Ivan the Terrible, the mercury addict. Ivan IV of Russia ruled from 1547 to 1584. He earned the name Terrible through decades of brutality, but his most disgusting habits came from his desperate fear of death. Ivan became obsessed with alchemy and immortality. His court alchemists convinced him that mercury was the key to eternal life. So Ivan started taking mercury, a lot of mercury. He would swallow mercury pills daily. He would bathe in mercury-infused water. He even had mercury rubbed into his skin. The result? Slow, agonizing mercury poisoning. His hair fell out in clumps. His teeth rotted and fell out. His skin developed open sores that never healed. But Ivan didn't connect his deteriorating health to the mercury. He thought he wasn't taking enough, so he increased the dose. By his final years, Ivan was essentially a walking corpse. His body was so saturated with mercury that his sweat was toxic. Servants who touched him would develop rashes. His bed sheets had to be handled with gloves. When Soviet archaeologists examined Ivan's remains in the 1960s, they found mercury levels 32 times higher than normal. His bones were so contaminated they're still toxic today. You literally cannot safely handle Ivan the Terrible's skeleton. He poisoned himself so thoroughly that he remains poisonous 400 years after death. Emperor number 7, Nero, the Performer. Nero ruled Rome from 54 to 68 AD. Everyone knows he supposedly fiddled while Rome burned, but his truly disgusting habits are less well known. Nero fancied himself an artist, a singer, a poet, a performer. He would force the Senate to attend his concerts that lasted for hours. No one was allowed to leave, even to use the bathroom. Senators would urinate in their togas rather than risk Nero's wrath. Women would give birth in the audience rather than leave. People literally died in their seats and weren't removed until Nero finished performing. But Nero's personal hygiene was even worse than his concerts. He had a peculiar grooming ritual. He would pluck his beard, hair by hair, with golden tweezers. This would take hours, and he would save every single hair. He had them collected in a golden box, studded with pearls. He called it his treasure. Nero also had unusual bathing habits. He would bathe in milk, specifically milk from pregnant donkeys. He believed it kept his skin youthful. He required 500 pregnant donkeys to be kept near Rome at all times, just for his baths. The logistics alone were insane. The smell of 500 donkeys in the Roman heat must have been overwhelming. But Nero didn't care. He would soak in lukewarm donkey milk for hours. Then he wouldn't rinse off. He'd just put his clothes on over the dried milk. Imagine the smell. Imagine the texture. Imagine being a senator, trying to discuss policy with an emperor who smells like sour milk and has dried donkey secretions flaking off his skin. Emperor number 8, Caligula, the horse consul. We can't talk about disgusting emperors without mentioning Caligula. He ruled Rome from 37 to 41 AD. And in those 4 years, he redefined imperial excess. Everyone knows Caligula tried to make his horse a consul, but the details are even more revolting than you think. Incitatus, his horse, lived better than most Romans. The horse had a marble stable, an ivory manger, purple blankets, the imperial color, a collar of precious gems. But here's the disgusting part. Caligula would invite the horse to dinner parties. As a guest, the horse would be seated at the table, served wine in golden goblets, and Caligula would have full conversations with it. He would ask the horse's opinion on political matters. He would toast the horse's health. He would feed the horse from his own plate. Then he would kiss the horse, on the mouth, with tongue, in front of the entire court. Senators had to sit there and watch their emperor make out with a horse. They had to applaud. They had to pretend this was normal. But Caligula's relationship with his horse wasn't his only disgusting habit. He also had a peculiar diet. He would eat gold, actual gold leaf dissolved in his food. He believed it made him divine. What it actually did was give him severe digestive problems. Gold doesn't digest, it just passes through. Caligula would have servants examine his feces to collect the gold. They would wash it and return it to him, so he could eat it again. The Emperor of Rome was literally eating his own shit-covered gold. Emperor number 9, Henry VIII, the rotting king. Henry VIII of England ruled from 1509 to 1547. By the end, he was a 400-pound monster, but the weight was the least disgusting thing about him. Henry had an ulcer on his leg from a jousting accident. It never healed. For the last 11 years of his life, it was an open, festering wound, the size of a tennis ball, constantly weeping pus. The smell was so bad that courtiers could tell which room Henry was in from 3 rooms away. They described it as rotting flesh mixed with sewage. His doctors would drain pints of pus from it daily. Pints. They would pack it with ground pearls and gold flakes, because apparently infection loves expensive things. But the leg wound wasn't Henry's only problem. He was so fat he couldn't walk. He required a special device to hoist him onto his horse. He couldn't fit through normal doorways. Hampton Court Palace had to widen their doors for him. His eating habits were legendary. Breakfast, a whole chicken, a side of beef, bread soaked in wine, ale, and pastries. That was just breakfast. For dinner, he'd have 13 different meat dishes. He'd eat until he vomited, then eat more. His wine consumption was measured in gallons per day. But here's the truly revolting detail. Henry's diabetes made his urine smell sweet. It attracted flies. Combined with the infected leg, questionable hygiene, and his refusal to bathe regularly, Henry VIII was essentially a walking biological weapon. When he died, his coffin was left overnight at Sion House. The lead lining burst from decomposition gases. His bodily fluids leaked onto the floor. Dogs were found the next morning licking up the remains of the King of England. Emperor number 10, Christian VII, the masturbation chair. Christian, the 7th of Denmark, ruled from 1766 to 1808. But he was mentally ill from the start, and his illness manifested in spectacularly disgusting ways. Christian had a masturbation problem. Not just frequent, compulsive. He would do it anywhere, during state dinners, in the middle of meetings, while receiving foreign ambassadors. His doctors became so concerned about injury that they designed a special chair with restraints to prevent him from hurting himself. The King of Denmark had a medically prescribed masturbation prevention chair, but that wasn't his only disgusting habit. Christian would also slap people, randomly, without warning. Foreign dignitaries during negotiations, slap. His own wife during their wedding, slap. Servants bringing him food, slap. He seemed to find it hilarious. He also had a habit of smashing furniture. He would run through the palace at night, destroying things, leaping over tables, throwing priceless artwork, breaking windows. His advisors would follow behind him, cataloging the damage. Then there was his relationship with his dog. He declared it a government minister, not symbolically. He expected people to take orders from the dog. Cabinet meetings included the dog. The dog had its own chair, its own place setting at dinner. Christian would ask the dog's opinion on policy, then interpret its barks as political advice. Denmark was being governed by a man who took orders from a dog, while masturbating compulsively and slapping diplomats. Emperor number 11, Farouk of Egypt, the kleptomaniac king. We're ending with a modern emperor. Farouk ruled Egypt from 1936 to 1952. He had unlimited wealth, multiple palaces, over 1,000 expensive suits, and he used all this privilege to become a pickpocket. Farouk was a kleptomaniac, but not just any kleptomaniac. He trained himself in the art of pickpocketing. He called it the hand of the thief. Winston Churchill met with Farouk once, left the meeting missing his watch. The King of Egypt had stolen it. During state dinners, guests would leave missing wallets, jewelry, medals. Farouk had lifted them all. He found it amusing, but his kleptomania was just the beginning. Farouk was also obsessed with the color red. He owned hundreds of red cars. He made it illegal for anyone else in Egypt to own a red car. If he saw one, he'd have it confiscated. He once shot out the tires of a red car that tried to pass his convoy. The driver was a diplomat. International incident. Farouk didn't care. He also had the world's largest pornography collection, over 10,000 items. He insisted it was for educational purposes. Sure, buddy. But the most disgusting thing about Farouk was his eating. He was so obese he required reinforced furniture. Restaurants had to remove chair arms so he could fit. He would order entire menus, not items from the menu, the entire menu, everything, then complain he was still hungry. When he died in 1965, his coffin had to be specially constructed. They couldn't find one large enough. He was buried in what was essentially a reinforced crate. The King of Egypt, pickpocket and glutton, buried in a box. 11 emperors, 11 men with absolute power. And every single one of them used that power to become spectacularly disgusting. They collected urine. They bathed in blood. They ate gold from their own feces. They made out with horses. They rotted from the inside out. They masturbated compulsively in public. They pickpocketed their own guests. Here's the pattern you need to see. Absolute power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. When you can execute anyone who criticizes you, you stop getting feedback. When reality bends to your will, you lose touch with reality. When millions exist only to serve you, you forget you're human. These emperors had everything. Power, wealth, armies, kingdoms, and what did they do with it? They refused to bathe. They thought they were made of glass. They died laughing at bad jokes. They tried to make horses into politicians. Actually, looking at modern politics, maybe Caligula was just ahead of his time. At least his horse probably showed up for work. The real horror isn't that these men were disgusting. It's that thousands of people had to pretend they weren't. Courtiers who vomited from the smell had to smile and bow. Diplomats who got slapped had to thank the emperor for the honor. Senators who watched their ruler make out with a horse had to applaud. That's what absolute power creates. Not just monsters, but entire systems designed to enable and celebrate monstrosity. If you found these imperial freaks as disturbing as I did, drop a comment telling me which disgusting habit shocked you most. And if you think modern leaders are any better, I've got news for you. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because next week I'm exposing the revolting personal habits of 20th century dictators. Trust me, Stalin's bathroom situation will haunt your nightmares. See you in the next investigation into the dark side of power.